Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to webinar conducted by GSS Management Consultancy on GoAML anti-money laundering in United Arab Emirates. In today's sessions, we will discuss the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act, and we will discuss the new application GoAML. Once again, thank you for joining us. Before going into sessions, let me introduce the speakers. There are two speakers that will be conducting the sessions, me and along with me, my co-host, Mr. Arfat Umar Nabiwala. My name is Gulzar Ahmed. I am managing partner of GSS Management Consultancy and GSS International Chartered Accountant. I have 18 years plus experience. I have served Pakistan, UAE and USA. I have a vast experience in the field of compliance and specifically in the field of AML as well. AML in UAE, particularly this GoAML, we have a very hands-on experience of registering in GoAML application as well. Now I will request our co-host, co-speaker,
Mr. Arfat,
to
to
start
start
the
the
session.
session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Hi, thank you, Gulzar, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arafat Umar, and I'm qualified chartered accountant with ICAW and the fellow member of the ACCA as well. I do have experience of more than 19 years in the financial management, WET implementation, and internal audit and risk management, and also in the implementation of the control framework as well. Uh, I just want to mention one experience which I had. Uh, Actually, I got involved in the implementation of the GoAML control framework for one of the biggest banks in South Africa, which is Investec Bank. So yeah, that's about my experience production.
Thank you,
Thank you
Arfat, for introducing
yourself.
yourself.
We
We
will
will
appreciate
appreciate
that
you
you will
will
guide
guide
us.
us about the world response on anti-money laundering and terrorist financing, anti-money laundering process, and what are applicable laws on anti-money laundering and terrorist financing, and then we can proceed for the other sections as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Gulzar. Actually, we are talking about the world response on the money laundering and the terrorist financing. So, if you see the holistic view, the world has responded tremendously, and the main role played is by the United Nations. Actually, they came up with many regulations, many platforms where they make sure that all the countries are involved, they are registered, and I mean there are so many laws they introduce, and there are so many platforms they came up with. So United Nation is playing the main role, and then we have another organization which is called FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force. So this entity, they came up with 40 recommendations. Actually, they were established in 1989 by the G7 countries, and that was the main objective and purpose of this organization, to combat the money laundering and the terrorist financing. And they are mainly focused on the financial transactions, and they are making sure that all the countries, they are having the control in place on the financial transactions, and as a result, they can identify the money laundering and all the terrorist financing as well. So, well, these are the two different organizations, FATF and the United Nations, but they are working very closely, and their objective is to combat the money laundering and the terrorist financing. So, in this regard, FATF, they came up with the 40 recommendations of the good practices, and they want all of their members to comply with those recommendations. But after 9/11, they came up with 9 more recommendations specifically focused on the terrorist financing. So if you take the holistic view, we are talking about 40 plus 9 recommendations for the FATF, and FATF is nowadays very active, and they are making sure that all the countries, they are playing their part, and they are implementing all these recommendations. Then the world responded as well, and they also established the financial intelligence units under the umbrella of the central banks. And financial intelligence units, they are very actively playing their role in each country. And similarly, here in UAE, we have the financial intelligence unit, which was established back in 2019 by the Central Bank of UAE. Then the world has responded as they established the protocols and the platforms for sharing the intelligence and evidences, and that's the role of the FIU. Whatever information they are collecting, then they're sharing it with all the other intelligence units around the world, and all the information is shared with the national database and with the international organizations as well. And then each country, they responded to the world as well, and they came up with their own technical assistance for the country, and they customized the regulations actually. And they customize the regulation and they implement their own regulations, which is also in line with the overall governance framework. So that's how the world responded. Then later on, I mean, if you see the next slide, we are talking about the overall component, how the AML and the CFT regime works. So what we discussed in the previous slide, actually, we are discussing here, and we just categorize it into the three areas. One is the functional compliance structure, which is the overall compliance structure, which we discussed just now, which includes your system in place, your regime in place. You have regulations. You have to have the policies and procedures in place. So this is the overall compliance culture. So once you have the compliance culture, here we are talking about the country level. So first of all, country has to make sure that they do have the compliance culture in place. And then the second thing is they need to have the monitoring bodies as well, which is here in the functional regulatory bodies. We are talking about the central banks. It might be central bank, it might be Security and Exchange Commission, it might be the insurance regulator, Ministry of Economy, or whatever. So there are so many organizations they can work around, and they can come into the part, and they can do the monitoring of this compliance culture. And then lastly, we are talking about the effective financial intelligence units, as what we discussed just now. So their responsibility, and actually financial intelligence unit, they are taking a very important role, and they are playing a very important part here as well. So their responsibility is to collect the information from all the organizations who are registered with the GoAML system, and then they need to analyze the transactions. And the purpose and objective of the analysis is to identify the unusual transactions, identify any transactions which may have some potential issues as well. And once they are sure with the data, they are also disseminating this information with other regulatory bodies at the national level and at the international level as well. Well, if you flip to the next slide, yeah. So this is, yeah.
Thank you very much for explaining the world response on the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing and the anti-money laundering process. Now we will appreciate if you can go through by applicable laws and regulations. That will really help us, and then we can start what is GoAML and the purposes of that one. So appreciate if you can explain the applicable laws, national as well as international. That will really help our audience to understand the process. Thank you.
Sure, Gulzar, and thanks very much for brought my attention on here. So here actually there are so many laws and regulations which the international community is following, and there are some laws which are there for the national level as well, to understand the magnitude of the issue and the guidance for individual companies to implement this law. So if you talk about the international, like international financial action is there, then financial action task force 40+9 recommendations, as what we discussed just now. And then we just mainly discuss the United Kingdom and the United States of America, like what regulations they are following in this regard. So Terrorist Asset Freezing Act 2010 for United Kingdom, then the Counter-Terrorism Act, Anti-Terrorism Crime and Security Act in UK, and if you talk about the USA, you have the US sanction programs, which is administered by the US Treasury Office. And then if you talk about the national level, we have many regulations and many cabinet decisions and the guidance in the last 2-3 years. So we just list down here. So I mean, you can just go through all of them. So mainly, if you see here, which is the federal law, which was issued in 2018, and then cabinet decision of 2019 as well. And then in June 2019, Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank of UAE was established, and they launched the anti-money laundering platform as well. Then guideline for designated non-financial business and profession, and then administrative notice 20 of 2020, and then cabinet decision number 58 of 2020, cabinet decision number 74 of 2020. And then in November 2020, Minister of Justice creates a special federal courts for the AML. And in November 2020 as well, UAE set up the local courts specializing in the money laundering and the tax evasion crimes. So here we just combined some of the laws of national level. Obviously, this is not the exhaustive list. There are other regulations as well which are applicable. So we just wanted to give you the high-level overview of the laws and the regulation. But here it is pertinent to mention that all the countries of the FATF, they have to comply with all the recommendations issued by the FATF. And UAE and the GCC is the member of the FATF, and UAE is the member of the GCC. So being a member of the GCC by UAE, they have to comply with these regulations and these recommendations as well.
Thank you, Arfat, for explaining the anti-money laws relating to international and national level. Yeah, there are around 111 countries that have different laws relating to AML and terrorist financing. Now, the next step, we will see a new application that is basically developed by United Nations to combat the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. And most of the countries, like more than 50% of the member countries, around 56 countries basically, have already implemented this GoAML. Now, in GCC, UAE is the first that is going to implement this GoAML. We will request Arafat to explain what is GoAML in detail, the purpose of the GoAML, and how GoAML will work. Does it have some interfaces with other financial intelligence units or some other GoAML with other countries? So we will wait for the presentation from Mr. Arafat. Thank you, Arafat.
Thank you, Gulzar. So let us first discuss about what is GoAML. So GoAML is the software solution which is designed by the Drug and Crime Office of United Nations, and this is actually approved by the financial intelligence units throughout the world. So basically, GoAML is the software solution which FIU is monitored and administered by the GoAML software, and every country, they have to implement this GoAML software as well. Right. So yeah, so actually basically it is the software solution, and as we discussed, it is developed by the IT Information Technology Services of the United Nations on Drug and Crime. So once this GoAML come into the force in the country, then country is cascading down to the country level, to the company level, and they have categorized, as we are going to discuss at the later stage, what are the companies and what are the sectors they have to comply and they have to register with this GoAML software. So this GoAML software is administered by the FIUs, and FIU, they are reporting to the Central Bank of UAE. Then if you cascade down the whole structure, then UAE government, they have identified some sectors which they have to register with the GoAML software. So once you register with the GoAML software, then you have to have the responsibility to report back on the GoAML software. And once you report, then the data will be shared with the financial intelligence unit, and that's how it works. So if you see, we have taken this from the United Nations website. So they claim that as of today, 111 FIUs are engaged with the UN, among which 57 have already deployed the GoAML software. So 56 countries around the world, they have already deployed the GoAML software, and they are already working on this software as well. So that's about the purpose. That's about the GoAML introduction. So now we will discuss about the purpose. So as we discussed, like the Financial Action Task Force was established in 1985 by the G7 countries, and then they have the recommendation as well. The third one, if you see the recommendation number 20 of FATF is very important, which talks about the suspicious transactions, which is the whole core we are talking over here. Because once you are registered with the GoAML, you have to report back all the suspicious transactions in your organization on the GoAML, which will go to the FIUs. And this is what overall purpose of the GoAML, to report the suspicious transactions. In 2009, Office on Drugs and Crime of United Nations, they have conducted the study, and they found that around $1.6 trillion were laundered. So after that, they thought about this process, and they thought like there should be something where they have to work on, and the world around the world, countries around the world, they have to work on that as well. And there should be some the platform where countries or the companies, they also have to report back all the suspicious transactions, and it has to be reported at the country level and then at the international level as well. So that's what the purpose of the GoAML. Then we will discuss about how GoAML will work. So as we does, I think I just highlighted, at the very high level how it works. So first of all, there are three main the stages. The first of all is the collection. So these things we are talking about, what we are going to happen, or what it is going to happen actually after you register with the GoAML. So then the first thing is the collection of data. So data is submitted to FIUs from banks and other financial institutions and designated non-financial business and professions. So once you are registered with the GoAML, then you have to share the information and share the data with FIUs through GoAML system. So for them, it's a collection of data. Then what they do is they do the analysis of the data, and the objective and purpose of this analysis is to identify the unusual transactions and identify the areas where they have to focus, and they can identify some of the transactions which may have some issues. So they do the rule-based analysis, they do the risk scoring and the profile, and several other things to identify those unusual transactions. So once the collection is done, analysis is done, the next stage is the data exchange. So exchange of data between FIUs and the intelligence units. So FIUs around the world, they have one platform, and these information, if it is relevant to the international community, then definitely it is going to be shared with the FIUs around the world, and this data will be shared at the national level as well, with all the agencies and with all the authorities at the national level as well. So how the data will be will be, the collected, and what are the forms. So obviously there are, it's a long guideline is there, but we just identified some of the reports which companies they have to report to the FIUs through the GoAML. So one is the cash transaction reports, suspicious transactions reports, and electronic fund transfer report. And another thing is there, every company, they have to keep an eye on the authorities website, because they do have the terrorist organizations listing. So these lists may be changed on a daily basis. So you have to be, extra cautious on that, and you might need to look into these websites on a daily basis and identify if there is any terrorist organization which is classified on these websites, and if there is any transaction related to those organizations which is happening in your company, so you have to report. And if you don't know that that transaction comes into that list, so you might miss that transaction to report. So there might be some, there are hefty penalties on that as well. So it is very important area where you have to look into, and you have to keep an eye, and you have to identify those list of the terrorist organizations, and you have to have all the updated list as well. So that's about the GoAML work. And then GoAML interfaces with other at the national level and the international level. There are systems where GoAML will interface. So first of all, it is the national operational data. So through GoAML can be interfaced with national operational database. Then we have Europol, which is administered for the European countries. The middleware GoIntel interface, GoAML and FIU.net for cross-border reporting with European Union. And then we have Interpol as well. So they do have the system of I-24/7 and iLink. So this system can be interfaced with the Interpol system as well. And then there is one group which is called Egmont Group, and this group is a non-political international entity which provides forum to all the FIUs to come on this forum and discuss about these issues and share the information as well. So this is informal group, but it is very effective, and all the FIUs, they have to register with this group, and they have to participate in this group as well.
Thank you, sir, for a wonderful session. We have learned about the world response on anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. And we have learned about the GoAML, that is a software that is being implemented for some of the companies. And here we will see the details. Yeah, please proceed. Next slide. Here are basically the companies are the individuals that need to be registered under GoAML. The first one is financial institutions. Whenever we are saying the financial institutions, it covers banks, exchange houses, insurance companies, finance houses. The companies are the organizations that are providing credit facilities of any type, and the entities that are involved in finance lease businesses, not operating lease, finance lease businesses. So they have to register under this GoAML. Before this GoAML, these entities were already reporting, but that were not reporting under GoAML. They have a separate reporting framework, like banks were reporting to Central Bank of UAE, insurance companies were reporting to insurance authorities, and some companies were reporting to Ministry of Authorities. So they have different platforms. If they are still existence that are applicable on them, they have to comply with that as well, but they need to register under this GoAML as well. The other stage is after the financial institutions, that is most important, and it has impacted a lot of companies and businesses as well. That is DNFBPS, means designated non-financial businesses and professions. We have seen the financial businesses and professions that are financial institutions, and we have already discussed. Now they have added certain companies or individuals that have to register under this GoAML. What are those? That are brokers and real estate agents. Does all brokers and real estate agents need to register? We will see in the next few slides, but here we will see just a broader level category. What are the companies or individuals that need to be registered under this GoAML? The first one is brokers and real estate agents, then dealers in precious metal stones, then lawyers, notaries, and other independent legal professionals, including accountant, auditors, and some others that are providing services. Then auditors and accountant, we have a separate category as well. Then businesses service providers, including trust, that is also a part of that one. We will see a little bit about these ones, the categories of the transactions that need to be registered, and then we can move. The first one is brokers and real estate agents. As we said, do all real estate brokers and agents need to register or not? The answer is when they are concluding the transactions on behalf of their customers, means when they are doing sale and purchase on behalf of their customers, yes, they have to register under this GoAML. But if they are not doing the transactions on behalf of the client as a sale and purchase, they need not to register. I have one client that has its properties. It is renting out the properties, only its own properties, operating lease properties means. So it need not to register. But if they will start providing this sale and purchase on behalf of their customers, yes, they need to register. So you have to evaluate the criteria of each of these DNFBPs, that whether they have to register or not. So at this stage, the most important is to evaluate that criteria and make an assessment that whether your entity need to be registered under GoAML or not. The second, dealers in precious metals and precious stones. So what does it mean? Does all metal traders need to register or not? Basically, whenever they are seeing precious metals, and they have a guideline, separate guideline on this one as well. It means it includes four elements: gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. And when they are seeing precious stones, it means diamonds, pearls, and few other are include diamonds, gold, and diamond and pearls are part of that one. So the first criteria that if they are dealing with that four precious metals, yes, they need to register. Then the precious stones, that is diamond and pearls, they need to register. But if there are small transactions, even in that case, they need to register or not? And what is the purity level that they need to register? So there is a proper guideline. We will suggest to go through that guideline. It has like more than 60-70 pages. But here is the purity level. If the gold purity level is more than 50%, they have to register. If platinum have like more than 80% purity level, they have to register. And the number of the amount of transactions involved should be more than 55,000 dirhams. Basically, it is $15,000 that they have converted into 55,000 dirhams. It can be a single transactions, or it can be a multiple transactions. So if your entity falls under that category, you have to register under this GoAML. If you are not dealing with precious metal, you are not dealing with precious stones as per the definitions, or your transaction level is less than this criteria, you need not to register. Otherwise, you have to comply and you have to register that one. Then lawyers, notaries, and other independent legal professionals and independent accountants are very important. And we will emphasize few minutes on this one. Do all these need to register? Let's go through together who are required to register. When preparing, conducting, or executing financial transactions for their customers in respect of the following activities: purchase and sale of real estate, management of funds owned by the customers, management of bank accounts, saving accounts or securities accounts, organizing contributions for the establishment or their operations and maintenance of their accounts, creating, operating, and managing legal persons or legal arrangements, selling and buying commercial entities. So if your entity is doing any of these on behalf of your client, then you have to register. There was one questions from a person, that is Yoga Yujeshwaran. Excuse me if I pronounce it wrongly. That all the accountants need to be registered or not. So here is the criteria. If you fall under any of this one, yes, you have to register. But if you are providing only bookkeeping, you need not to register. But if you are doing any of these transactions on behalf of your client, yes, you have to register. I hope it is clear to you, and this is the most important sections of this webinar. So if you have any questions in this one, we will be more than happy to answer that one. Then the fourth category, providing of corporate services and trust. And we can see the definition of a trust. You can see it is important. Some people are missing and like this important thing, and they are saying that they do not fall under that the DNFBP criteria and they need not to register. So they have to look into this, the definition of a trust. A definition of trust is a legal relationship in which a settler places funds under the control of a trustee for the interest of the beneficiary or for the specified purpose. In simple words, if someone gives you authority for some funds on their behalf, then it means you are handling their financial transactions. It will be considered a trust and you have to register under this one. And it is not mandatory that trust should be registered under Ministry of Economy. It can be unregistered trust as well. So you have to look from the substance over form, not from a legal point of view. If it makes a trust, you have to register. If it does not, you need not to register. Then we can see the others that are providing corporate services. Do they need to register or not? Here are the few transactions. If they fall any of them, yes, they need to register. Otherwise, they need not to. What are those? One by one, we can go through that one. Number one, acting as an agent in the creation of establishment of legal persons. So means all the PRO companies that are creating entities on behalf of client, they have to register. Working as or equipping and other persons to serve as director or secretary of a company, as a partner or in similar positions in a legal person, as a legal person. So if you are working as a director or nominee director on behalf of another person, yes, then that organizations need to be registered. And there is another law that is closely connected with this law, that is UBO law. So you have to read that law and you have to make proper assessment of that law as well. Then providing a registered office, work address, residence, correspondence address or administrative address of a legal persons or legal arrangements. Like you are like in the case, like I have few clients, for them I am their registered tax consultant and they have provided my address to FTA. In case of some audits, FTA is directly contacting to me. So I will be eligible to register under that category. Then performing work or equipping another person to act as trustee for a direct trust or to perform a similar functions in favor of another form of a legal arrangement. So in simple words, we can say if you are directly or indirectly involved in the trust, that trust need to be registered. Then working arrangement, working, are
Sorry,
you,
sorry, Gulzar, can I stop you over here? So I was just thinking, if you see all the criteria, either it's a real estate, either it's auditors, either it's the lawyers or the corporate services. So can I say that, like, if you are working on behalf of your client, then you have to register. Otherwise, you are not. If we sum up everything, so we just need your expert opinion on that. What do you think?
Arafat, very, very good observations and analysis. Yes, the basically the crux of this GoAML is that if you are working directly or indirectly on behalf of someone else and it involves a financial transactions, then you have to register. So this is basically the conclusion of the GoAML. Then we can see there might be some other professions and activities that ministry can say that they need to register for that one, and any time they can direct certain organizations to register for that one. But here is another point: if you are a auditor and you do not fall under any of these categories, still you need to register under this GoAML, because for auditors you need not to look any criteria. If you are auditor of a company, external auditor, not internal auditor, statutory auditor, then you need to comply this GoAML. Otherwise, if you are just accountant and you are performing a bookkeeping, then you need not to register. Then
Thank you,
the
Gulzar. Thank you, Gulzar. And I have just seen one comment from Mr. Yoga, and he rightly said that in these criteria we have to see the substance over form, right? So we don't need to go and see the activity on your trade license. Sometimes you have the different activity on the trade license, but actually you are doing something else, you know. So what do you think about that, Gulzar?
yeah, basically you have to differentiate auditors and accountant. For auditors, there is no exceptions. Auditor have to register under this GoAML, and auditor can be only if they are authorized by the federal ministry. So you have a license for that one. Then the accountant, if they are performing any of these activities on behalf of the client, then they need to register under this GoAML. Otherwise, they need not to register. I hope it is clear to everybody. If still you have some doubts, we will be more than happy to assist you. Yes, Arafat. Then the third category is regulatory authorities. Under this GoAML, all the regulatory authorities have to register under this GoAML so that they will be also reporting to this GoAML. Basically, this GoAML with, will be under the supervision of FIU of Central Bank of UAE, and then it will, of course, will be sharing the information to other units as well. So what are the regulatory authorities? There are different regulatory authorities like JAFZA, DAFZA, DED, SAF free zones, Rakis, Hamriya, Shams free zones. So we have given the names of few, but there are around like 20, more than 22 regulatory authorities. So they all have to comply with this one. Another important one, and some people are missing on that one, that is basically non-profit organizations. If there are some organizations, the nature of that one is non-profit organizations, then they have to register under this GoAML. So there is no exception for them, because some of the non-profit organizations were also involved in anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. So they have make it mandatory for all the non-profitable organizations to register under this GoAML. We have seen the very important criteria that they have, other than the banking companies, that they have added to register under this GoAML. be relating to the compliance requirement, and Mr. Arafat will proceed on that one.
Thank you, Gulzar. Actually, we have a very good explanation on the registering criteria from Gulzar, and I think at this point in time, it is very important to focus on these things and you have to assess your own organization, and you have to identify whether your organization fall into that criteria and whether you should register or you should not register. And what we are going to discuss right now, it's a later stage. Maybe once you are registered, then you have to think about the compliance obligations as well. But we just thought to just give you high level understanding of what it might be like once you are registered. So first of all, you have to identify the risks. What are those risks related to the anti-money laundering and the terrorist financing, which is relevant to your own organization? So first part is to identify the risk. Then the next part is, once you identify your risk, then you have to mitigate those risks. And how you can mitigate those risks is to have the robust policies and procedures in place, and you have to have a proper control framework in there so you can mitigate all the risks which you have already identified. And within those control framework, the most important thing is the customer due diligence. So earlier, this part was, relevant to the financial institutions where they were applying this customer due diligence part. But now, after this law and the implementation of this law, all the non-financial designated non-financial business and professions, they have to implement this part as well, which is the customer due diligence. And the objective of this customer due diligence is to know your customer, and know your customer from the perspective of the anti-money laundering and the terrorist financing. And then we have the suspicious transaction as well, which we discussed earlier, that if you have the suspicious transactions, you have to keep them aside, and you have to tell the FIUs through the GoAML reporting that these are the transactions which you feel that they are suspicious. And then we have the overall governance framework for all the designated non-financial business and professions, especially. They need to come up with the overall governance framework, because once you have the overall governance framework, then all the other things will implement and comply automatically. So what could include in the governance framework is to have the policies and procedures in place, identify the risks, mitigate those risks. You need to have the customer due diligence or the know your customer checklist in place. So these kind of things you need to have. Then the proper documentation is very important as well. Now onwards, you need to keep at least for 5 years, or maximum it could be like 15 years as well. You have to have all the documentation in place as well. So this is the overall framework or the compliance obligations once you are registered with the GoAML. Then the next one we have is the customer due diligence. So we do have the Article 6 in the regulation, which is specifically focused on the customer due diligence. So I would ask Mr. Gulzar to just shed some light on this regulation.
Arafat, thank you very much. But before that, I want to give answer one question of Saeed Khan. Saeed Khan, very good questions you raise. It's what about tax or VAT consultant? Do they need to register under GoAML? As a tax or VAT consultant, they need not to register under GoAML. And as rightly said by Yoga, the Ministry of Economy has conducted one seminar, and they have already explained this, that they need not to register under this GoAML. But here is another important point that you need to consider, because we have seen if you are providing a registered office services to your client, then you have to register. Like in some cases, I have provided, as I said earlier, said that I have provided my company address. In case they have FT has some queries, they can directly contact with me, not with the client. So in that case, I'm providing registered office services to my client. In that capacity, I have to register under GoAML. But if we are talking about only from a VAT or consultant point of view, we need not to register. I hope it clarifies your questions. Then there is a customer due diligence, a very important, but this will be after the registration, that what you have to do. You have to, we are already doing the customer due diligence, but now there will be some more strict criteria for the customer due diligence. And even the companies that are not registered, they are encouraged to do this due diligence process as well. What is due diligence process? To know your customers in a better way means you have to maintain relationship. If there are some occasional transactions, you have to be vigilant about that one. And whenever they are seeing occasional transactions, it should be the value of more than 55,000 dirhams. It can be a single or multiple transactions, and that you have to report under GoAML as well. And if there are some wire transfers for more than 3,500 dirhams, that you have to report as well. Same way, if you have to be suspicious, you have to be vigilant about the suspicious transactions. And if there are some doubts, after clarifying the doubts, you have to enter into a deal. So the maximum level of the things that you can know about your customers, that is called a due diligence. And for due diligence, you have to perform certain procedures, like you have to get the trade license, you have to check their background history, and some software, there are some software available that can check the history. And most of the big four or top 10 companies are already implemented those softwares as well. Is next. Next.
Yeah, next we sorry. Yeah, next we have we will talk about the Article 21 of the regulation, which talks about the compliance officer and the responsibility of the compliance officer as well. So once you are registered, then you have to have your own compliance officer, or you can outsource the compliance officer job as well. But the objective and the responsibility of the compliance officer is to detect the transaction relating to any crime, review, scrutinize, and study records, receive data concerning suspicious transaction, and take decision to either notify the FIU or not. Then prepare, execute, and document ongoing training and development programs for the institution employees, and then collaborate with the supervisory authority and the FIUs to provide them with all the requested data and allow their authorized employees to view the necessary reports and the documents. So in short, if you see the overall the responsibilities, compliance officer is the face of the organization in front of the FIUs. FIU will coordinate directly with the compliance officer, and compliance officer has to make sure that all the suspicious transactions or all the reporting criteria, they have to submit on timely basis to the FIUs. And as I mentioned earlier, that it is mentioned in the one of the guidelines that the compliance officer, he has to make sure and he has to check on a daily basis the websites of the authorities, because if there is any change in the list of the terrorist organization, he has to be well aware about that, and he has to report all these transactions which might conclude with those transactions with those the terrorist organizations. So he has to be on top of the game, and he has to know actually who are those transactions and who are those entities and who are those transactions which happened with those entities, and he has to report in a timely manner to the FIUs. Then we have another very important thing is the policies and procedures. And what is the role of the compliance officer in the internal rules and procedure is, as we mentioned and as we discussed earlier, he has to make sure that all the regulations of the AML, they have to be embedded in the internal rules and procedures, and the internal rules and procedures, they have to mitigate those risks which you have already identified. And what are the implications of the non-compliance if you don't, if you are fall into the non-compliance, then there are some certain penalties as well, which ranges from 50K to 5 million. And in some cases, it is a criminal offense as well, and there might be the jail term as well. So compliance officers and the companies as well, they have to be very cautious and vigilant in these kind of things and these transactions, especially after you register. That all these transactions, they have to be reported to the authorities in a timely manner. Gulzar, over to you.
Rafat, thank you very much for explaining the role of a compliance officers and compliance requirement. There is another important question relating to this one, that is from Yogesh Veshwaran. Any qualification prescribed for the compliance officer? Does she have to pass any exam or do CPD activities? As per my understanding, they have mentioned the compliance officer should have a relevant experience. They does not say any prescribed qualifications or CPDRs, and relevant experience means it can be from the AML or it can be from the internal audit. And we are expecting that in future they will prescribe or they will have detailed rules and regulation on this compliance officer. But as of now, I have no idea about this. If you have, first,
I
I will request Arafat to share his experience.
as what Gulzar rightly said, that the relevant experience is required and the relevant qualification is required. So the law is not it is not very clear in the law, but what we can exclude or what we can interpret from the law is the relevant experience is the financial experience, and he should be involved in the internal audit or the risk management criteria, and he should be involved in the risk management and the internal audit sector as well. But one more important thing which I want to highlight over here is every compliance officer which company has to hire, the company has to share the profile with the supervisory authority, and supervisory authority will approve that compliance officer, and then only company can hire that compliance officer. So obviously, for each case to case, they will evaluate the person's the profile, and they will take a call on individual basis. So this is very important to know for everyone, that you cannot hire any compliance officer straight away based on your own liking or disliking. You have to gather all the profiles, and then once you select with one of the profiles, then you have to share with your own supervisory authority, and then once the supervisory authority approve that person, then you can only hire. So yeah.
Rafat, thank you very much. And in certain cases, if the business, the nature of business is not complex and it's small or medium businesses, and you have a strong internal audit department, even they have this waiver of the compliance officer as well. But again, I will say there we are looking for the detailed guideline on this compliance officer. Yes, please. Yeah, then important how to register under this GoAML, because we have seen the things GoAML, and how to register under this GoAML. There are two-way steps to register under GoAML. First, we have to register under Service Access Control Manager, that is SACM. It is under the FIU of Central Bank of UAE. So first you have to register under this one, and once you register under this one, then you have to go under this GoAML systems, and you can register by yourself. And once you register under this SACM, that is Service Access Control Manager, then you will need a Google Authenticator to log into GoAML systems. This Google Authenticator basically will be a token that it has certain digits or a password that will change after every minute. And once you will be logged in under GoAML systems, you can put this token and you can log in. So they have certain rules to log in as well, in order to secure the privacy and authenticity of the reporting framework. So first you have to register under SCM, then you have to register under this GoAML system. What documents will be required to register under these two things? You will be needing the first one, authorization letter from your company. And in next slide, we have given the format as well. We will discuss in detail as well. And you will need a passport, resident visa, and Emirates ID of the shareholder or authorized manager. If the manager name is on the trade license, excellent. If not, then you will need a power of attorney for that person as well, and that should be authenticated by the, of course, the court. Then you will need a commercial trade license copy of this one. What you have to do then you have to make a single file, this authorization form, passport copy, resident visa, Emirates ID, trade license copy, power of authorizations, and you have to make a one file, and that file should not exceed 1 MB, and then you can download under this SACM and you can get the registration. The next one is authorization form. So number you can put it 01, or you can put it, if you have more than one companies, you can put 02, 03, and it will be 2020. Then you will put the date, current date, and you are addressing this to Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU. Whenever we are saying FIU, automatically it means FIU of Central Bank of UAE. After greetings, you will mention that we are authorizing the following companies, personnel, to act as admin and user. You can nominate a single person as an admin and user as well, or you can nominate two persons. So it's your choice. But you have to mention both, that the person will be admin and the person will be a user as well. Then you will put your company sign, stamp, and authorized signatory, and he can send it along with other documents for the GoAML registration. Normally this SACM registration is immediately done, but for under this GoAML it might take like 6 to 24 hours to get it registered under this one, and the deadline is 31st March. So we will urge all the entities, all the professionals to do the registration before 30th. So you have 1 day that your company is registered. Although you will put the data, if you will put the data on 31st March and it is not registered, you will be incompliant. But it's better to have some margin of error, so there will be no penalty on that one. Yes, way forward. Yes, appreciate if Mr. Arfat can have some highlight on that one, please.
Well, Gulzar, I mean, if we can sum up the overall webinar. So first of all, the assessment for each company is very important. So in order to do the assessment, they need to have the knowledge as well. So they need to understand, first of all, the regulation itself and the GoAML software as well. So once you know the regulation, then you can assess your organization, because you know better your organization. So you have to map your own transactions and your own activities in terms of the law, and you have to see whether you are falling into that or you're not. And once, if you follow, then you have to get yourself registered. As what Gulzar mentioned earlier, that those are the steps which you need to follow for the registration. And then once you register, then you have to go for the compliance part. And the first of all, and the top priority is to appoint or outsource the compliance officer from the compliance perspective. Once you appoint and identify your risks, once you appoint, then you identify your risk and assess your risk. Then you establish the updating the policies and procedures which has to be mitigating the risks, and in that actually maintaining the adequate level of risk-based customer due diligence, as we mentioned earlier. And then you have to do the ongoing monitoring process, then identify and reporting the suspicious transactions to the FIUs. Next one is putting in place an adequate governance framework, And then the last but not the least is maintaining the adequate records for at least for 5 years, minimum 5 years. So these are the things way forward which you have to look into, and you have to look all these things into sequence as well. So Gulzar, can you please mention like how GSS can help in this regard if anyone needs any help?
Arafat, thank you very much. Yeah, basically, we have seen that there are a lot of things that we need to consider, but at this point of time, the most important is the assessment whether to register under GoAML or not. Because if you are obliged to register and you miss the deadline, then there will be a huge penalty on that one. And if you are not required to register and you register by yourself, then you have to make a compliance requirement as well. So the first point is to make a proper assessment whether you need to register or not. If there are some companies that need your help, as I assume some consultant are already attending the seminars, then perform their formal assessment that whether they need to register, why they need to register. If not, why they need not to register. So perform a formal assessment so that they will have a records for their own purpose. And if there will be some penalty or some inspection at later stage, they can explain why they have not registered, and they should have a valid reasons for that one. Or if they are registered, they should have a valid reason why they have registered, and now they have to make a compliance requirement. At a GSS level, we can perform an assessment, a formal assessment, and we can give the report under our letterhead, sign and stamp. Then we can perform GoAML registration, or we can assist you under that GoAML registration process as well. Then we can provide a compliance officer support as well. The next stage, once you are registered, we can identify and assess your company's risk. We can highlight the mitigating factors, and we can establish policies and procedures. We can design customer due diligence, and we can monitor it on an ongoing basis. We can identify suspicious transactions based on the nature of the company, and we can support you in identification and reporting of those transactions as well. And we can make a framework, we can devise a framework, overall governance framework for this AML, and we can provide a training, and we can educate your staff as well for this GoAML. Thank you, Rafat. If you want to add something, it will be my pleasure. At the end of the session, we will answer all of your questions, and we can unmute your mic, and if you have some questions, you can raise that as well.
I would suggest, like, if you have any question, so just raise the hand, and then you can ask on this platform. I can see one Shehzad Hussain. Can you please open mic? Yes, Shehzad.
Hi everyone. Actually, I was wanted to know that with respect to penalty, so the compliance officer will be personally accountable as well in case of any non-compliance?
No, not really. These penalties are for the company itself. So because at the end of the day, company is registering under the GoAML. So if company is following, then they have to comply with the regulation. So if they are not complying, then they will be responsible for the penalty. And compliance officer is definitely a part of the organization. So ultimately, the organization is responsible for the compliance.
Okay, noted.
Shehzad, thank you very much for attending the session.
Thank you very much for attending the session. Basically, there are complete sessions on the penalties, and I will forward you the law as well. There are around like 20 sections relating to this one on penalties. And if this compliance officer, he will do some negligence, in that case, there are some penalties on him. If he performs his work with due diligence, there are no penalties. But if there is some negligence involved in that one, yes, personally he will be liable for penalties and even imprisonment as well. So there is
Yes. Yes.
so I will forward you all the penalties relating to that as well.
Okay.
So I hope your
Appreciate
question.
it.
So in that case, it means only in the case of negligence. If
Appreciate
you
it.
perform with due diligence, then there is no penalty on the compliance officer.
Okay. Noted.
Next one. We received another question from Yogesh. Just 1 minute. He has raised a question that are there any approved compliance forms? See, whenever we are saying that we have to report certain transactions under this GoAML, yes, they have their own prescribed forms, and you have to complete those forms as well. But on a complete level, there are no prescribed forms. So it depends on the nature and size of your company, and you can make according to the nature, size, risk of your entity. The other question is GSS approved compliance officer? We can say yes and we can say no, both. The reasons, as of now, there is no approved compliance officers as per Ministry of Economy. But in future, they might approve some of the companies as well. Like as all audit firms that have a compliance department, they can do this compliance framework. On the same way, we have a Big Four trained proper team, professionals team, comprising of at least 8 members, all qualified, all Big Four trained. So we can provide this services, and we can prove that we have the prescribed experience and we have the prescribed qualification. In future, if the ministry or central bank will be registering certain firms, we will try to register our firms as well. But as of now, we do not have any certification for the registration, but of course we meet the criteria to be appointed as a compliance officer. I hope it will clear your questions. At the end, one person mentioned that please share the PDF of the presentation. Of course, we will share this one, but some of you have directly joined without giving the email IDs. So we will request to leave your email ID, and we will make sure that you will receive the presentation and the video link on YouTube that you can watch at later on for your reference purpose. Thank you. If you have other questions, we will be more than happy.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I can't see any other question. No, I think that's it. So thanks very much, everyone, for attending this afternoon. And we hope that we clarify your questions and we clarify all your ambiguities as well. So going forward, definitely we will share this slides and we will share this presentation with you. But please provide us your email address and the contact details as well, and do let us know if we can help around. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all for attending the session, particularly Shahzad who attended from Dubai office, and Yogesh,
and who has a lot of questions. Sorry, Shahzad from Qatar office, and Yogesh who raised a lot of important questions, and hopefully we have answered all those. And also to Saeed Khan who attended the seminar, and to all other participants. Thank you very much and have a great day ahead. Okay, Allah Hafiz.